just come out of Vietnam, and I'd had a lot of personal problems in dealing with reintegrating into a society and a landscape, and it's a very hostile and alien world, and being able to go to NYU on the GI Bill, and then accidentally running into a teacher like Scorsese in Filmmaking 101 is about as lucky as you can get, because he was a great teacher. And not only was he a great teacher, he was inspirational. He loved movies, and that's what he conveyed to us, his love of movies. So here, it's exactly what I needed at the time, was somebody who believed in something, who had a soul for something, because I believed in nothing at that point. I was burnt out, and I was very, alienated from the American experience, and I didn't believe anybody. I didn't believe the government. I didn't believe family. I didn't believe any of the old values that I'd been raised with. And I think through Marty and through Haig Manoogian too, and through other teachers and Charlie Mill, I was able to find a new set of values. Well, I'd always liked the movies. My mom was a big movie fan, take me double features all the time. But I never believed that I could be making movies. It would always seem like a very exotic thing that was done in Los Angeles by exotic people. So I never took it seriously, and until I got back from Vietnam, and then I found that there were film schools that were going, and people were actually studying filmmaking for a living. It seemed like an easy way to get through college, especially on the GI Bill. But I'd been doing some writing before Vietnam, and I'd always been interested in writing. But over there, I couldn't write because of the rain. It was very heavy, and you couldn't keep notes. So I ended up the last few months of my tour buying a 35mm Pentax camera and shooting a lot of stills as I was in the jungle. And I found it a very visual experience. The colors in Vietnam are astounding, the greens and the yellows. I never thought that way before. I never thought about my senses. There was no room for words in Vietnam. It's really about touch, smell, and sight, and hearing. And I came back to the States, and I tried to blend really the visual that I'd seen in Vietnam with my previous writing experience into a combination. So bought a Super 8 and did a lot of zoom shots and running around with a Super 8 in the streets of New York. And then went to NYU and started on black and white 16mm with people like Scorsese. I'd done 3 or 4 short films that were terrible. That just had no meaning to them. They were just sort of silly exercises and trying to be a Keystone Cop or something like that. Shot in lofts on the Lower East Side, with the typical villain and the heroine. One's idea of movies rather than one's idea of life, So, which is sort of the problem. People always have an idea of movies, and when they do movies about other movies. But I think Marty gave me some criticism once, and he just said, you just got to do something that you really feel, that you've lived, something that's personal to you. So I went home, and I did the story about what it was like for me to come back to New York City and be alone. And I think some truth got out in the movie. It was a very crude picture, very crude sound. I had a French soundtrack from Celine's Journey to the End of Night. I had some Russian, like Borodin's Steppes of Central Russia as the soundtrack, and mixed it crudely. But it had some heart in it. It had some feeling. It sort of reminded me, oddly enough, of a Taxi Driver that Marty did a couple of years later. There was a lot of that type of feeling about alienation. The realization that there was enough tension and truth. There was enough tension and truth to be of interest. That the truth, the real life, was not so bad. That you could, as long as you could cut the boring bits out, it would be okay. I think I started to get that confidence, and I needed that confidence when you're young, making films. It wasn't about technique. It was really about the story. My advice to young filmmakers is persist. Because if the talent is there and it's not recognized, you have to persist. It's sometimes years, and it's very painful. You have to take rejection well. You cannot take it too personally, although I did many, many times. You cannot let it destroy you. You cannot let bitterness get to you. You're going to get more no's than you'll ever see yeses, at least in 10 years for me. Hopefully faster for some others. Now it's a better climate for younger people to write. The young screenplays, the young generation, there's more interest in it than when I came out. But I think that the ultimate best advice is to live life intensely well and examine it as you go. To hit the highs and lows of life, to have experiences, to know the ranges of life. That's more important than technique. To become a storyteller.